we're bringing you all you need to succeed in the real estate business. It's Spilling the LTea, brought to you by Lawyers Title, telling you what it's really like to work in real estate.
Welcome back to another episode. I'm your host, Tamera Gaede. Today, we're going to talk about real estate trends in DFW. But first, if you like my content, you're really going to love my escrow team. So let me have an opportunity to talk to you about your title needs. You can reach out to me on any of my social media platforms, and I would love to help you with anything real estate related. So very excited to have a repeat guest on the podcast today. I have with me Lance Taylor. He's with the Taylor team. He is a top producing team owner and entrepreneur. He ended 2022 with $80 million in production, and he leads a real estate team of 16 agents. But that is not all he does. And we were just talking about that before we got started with the show, that he is very diverse in his investment vehicles. And so we'll tap into some of that today. But first, I want to welcome Lance. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yeah,
good to see you again.
Good to see you as well.
Always great to partner with you, and looking forward to our conversation today.
Yeah, me as well.
So let's go ahead and get started. You know what? I'm going to change question number one. I told you that I might go off topic here, and I'm going to start out off topic. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of like, let's kind of set the stage for where we are right now. And we can set the stage not just with what the current real estate market looks like, but also let's talk about some trends and what you're seeing. Yeah. Okay. So that's kind of a A-B question, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, in terms of just things have changed a little bit, right? We've gone through this crazy 2020, 21. 21 is a really good in real estate. Things ramped up. And then you have a lot of, government intervention right now to try to get all this back under control.
Yeah.
The inflation, all the dollars that we're giving out during that time to kind of support and prop up companies. And although, they were protecting the downfall damage at that time, now we've got the flip side problem, which is just crazy inflation. And so you're seeing a tightening of, credit, which of course affects the housing industry, but also affects businesses. It affects a lot of, real estate elsewhere in the commercial and industrial spaces too, when rates are higher, as they are right now. And, hopefully as this inflation gets under control, we'll see rates start to drop back down and get to, a more advantageous area for investors, like myself.
From your lips to God's ears. Okay.
you got it. But also there's, I think there's more fear in the market right now, in general, of what the future looks like. We were going on kind of this upswing, just growth in general, from 15 to 20. And then this crazy event happens, right? And all of a sudden, no one really knows what the trend line is going to pick back up on.
Sure.
And so I think it's causing some interesting effects. Most of the friends that I'm connecting with in the entrepreneur side or investor side, they're wanting to sit on a little more cash because there's certainly going to be opportunities that fall out from this. We're tracking even the commercial real estate market too, and in 2021, people were paying higher and higher prices for apartment complexes, for example. Mm-hmm. And a lot of those didn't put rate caps on them. And so no one exactly knew that rates would go up to where they did. And it's causing some, upside down cash flow scenarios. Well, of course, not everybody can withstand that for a long period of time. It depends on the reserves. So again, I think everyone's just kind of preparing for really great opportunities, which is the exciting part of it. The downside of that is those opportunities come from others that maybe couldn't hold on to what they had. So I think we'll see a lot of partnerships and mergers and acquisitions, from that perspective too. And there'll be some really good win-wins out of that.
It's really interesting that you say that, excuse me, because I think that trickles down to residential real estate in more than one way. We've seen a really big dip in the luxury market, right? There's not a lot of activity. I'm waiting for the luxury market to come back.
Yes.
And so there's not a lot of activity in that, but from the conversations that I've had with those agents that deal with those higher price point portfolios, it's everybody's wanting to hold on to their cash because the fluctuations of the stock market and their portfolio packages as a whole because of what's happened, right?
Yep.
And then we're seeing the upside downness in the residential. People bought 100K over ask. Now they have to sell and they want their money back out of it. Right. And so what you're saying, it's so funny how one vantage point in the market can affect so many other things, right?
It's all connected, especially you talk about luxury, like who makes up the luxury sellers and buyers? Typically business owners.
Right.
Or higher up executives. And so on the business owner side, if they are locked into a really great interest rate right now, let's just say, they may not want to sell and move things around when they're in the midst of business opportunities. They want to keep personal kind of separate. Let's just really, stay forged ahead on the business opportunities. And then when it comes to people buying in the market, sometimes in luxury, they're all cash and they're rolling in, late stage kind of business owner. They've sold off a company and, that's all good. But if they're in the midst of their business portfolio, they don't want to necessarily take on a lot of debt. They could diminish their other opportunities. So,
okay, so let's expand on that. And I'm not trying to pigeonhole you here or
Sure.
make you bring out your crystal ball because I know it's, we don't have one.
Nope.
But the conversation that you're having with these business owners, do they have an idea of what they think a timeline might be for some of those? They're positioning themselves for a future opportunity.
Right.
So what does their timeline look like, or what are they setting up for?
I think this whole, Fed raising interest rates, that whole piece and watching the inflation, that's a really big indicator for a lot of them. It depends on the industry, of course.
Sure.
I think the other piece is that there's a lot of just unrest. We have an election year coming up next year. So, it'll be interesting as more of that starts to settle in. They're going to know where to put their resources. They're going to know where to start interjecting those resources. So, there may be, between now and November of next year, there may be a little floating period. And so I don't know exactly when that launching point will be. So
but you brought up an interesting point because typically we see a pause when in a presidential election's coming up, right?
Right.
And so it may be. And look, everything that we've talked about is 2023 is we don't know.
Correct.
And 2024 is going to be better. Okay.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
All we got.
I'm sticking with the same plan. Yeah.
And so I think it's really interesting that you say that it may be a holding period. I'm going to put that little feather in my cap for later because I'm an investor too.
Yeah.
I've been sitting on the sidelines myself. I mean, look, I get contacted with investment opportunities on a regular basis. And some of them have been quite painful that I've had to pass them up because, I've got my funds going into a different investment vehicle right now. While I'm waiting to see what's going to happen. It's highly possible because my risk tolerance is not very high that I'm going to lose out on some really great opportunities while I'm doing this. But teeing things up, that's what people like you are saying is we're teeing things up for a year from now.
It's a good time to be patient. I don't think you have to force things to happen. I think a lot's been learned after the last couple of years. And, people going into investment opportunities that just weren't as fruitful as they'd hoped for a myriad of reasons. So it's a good time to be patient. Now, there's still things, unfortunately, that happen that create great opportunities. And, unfortunately, the divorce rates are a little higher right now, right?
Okay.
And unfortunately, our baby boomers, some of those, are looking to divest from things and they just want simplicity in their life, right? So there's some distress happening because there's a squeeze that's happening for certain individuals, right? When they don't have the liquidity they need, they have to get rid of some. So you probably want to be patient to find more of those. Hey, this is just all the stars are aligning on this particular opportunity. Then you can pull the trigger. But I just don't think we need to force things to happen right now because there will be more opportunity that arises and more than likely late this year.
Well, hindsight's 2020, and of course you can't. I don't regret things in my life, but the one time I wish I was positioned correctly as an investor, was back in the 08, 09.
Don't we all? Yeah. Yeah.
Dang it!
Well, we may not be here today if we position ourselves correctly.
We'd be doing this in Costa Rica.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
Or somewhere else equally as fabulous. But, there is something too. I always watch people smarter, who I consider smarter than me. Okay. More plugged in, more in tune with what higher level investors are doing because I want to ride on that coattail stuff, right? Watch what they're doing, and I'm happy
Model
to plagiarize
success.
and
Absolutely.
All right, well, let's get back on point. Okay, we kind of talked about what some of the trends are going to look like over the next year. Let's kind of dive into the residential real estate market a little bit, especially with you coaching your team right now. Let's talk about, because we're in Collin County, and we are seeing in particular areas that aggressive market is back.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Very, very specifically to, these really low inventory markets that are sought after. the Allens and, Carrollton kind of goes over on the Denton side. Those markets have been really speedy. Certain opportunities in Frisco and McKinney and Prosper have been really speedy, especially when things are make ready and fully done. The higher the condition, has the backyard fully finished out with the pool and all that type of thing. Those are the ones that people dive on because it costs more to actually set all that up these days too.
No kidding.
And it takes time and energy. And I think one thing that people took out of the last couple of years is that sometimes you do just have to seize the opportunity.
Yeah.
Seize the day. Let's just live like we want to now if we can afford to do that. And so you want those folks are kind of wanting that more, that make ready opportunity. It's completely done. They don't have to do anything. Those opportunities go super fast. Now the ones that are at market price and just don't quite have the condition or just no zeal to it, those may not move as quick. And then of course the ones that are overpriced or way under on the condition side, that's the ones that sit. So if we're tracking data, we like to track our little market watch and
Yep.
And specifically in Collin County, right, we'll see this kind of natural cycle where there'll be, somewhere between 270 listings over a 7-day period, right? And 230 of those just went under active option. So we're not gaining a lot of ground in terms of our inventory right now, but we're in a May market.
Okay.
And so, this is typically the highest activity in the year happens in May. Doesn't necessarily mean it's the best time to sell or buy. It just means it's the highest activity. Everything culminates, and likely because of the school year timing, ending and going into the summer, that's when folks like to move or relocate with job positions. So, I'm not surprised to see the activity the way it is currently. But if we aren't able to catch up with the inventory side, which of course is we have sellers not wanting to sell because of their great interest rates, they don't want to move up or move down at this time. And then also we have the builders that kind of stutter stepped this past June, July of last year. They kind of stutter stepped. They saw the market's going to slow down. Hey, maybe we don't want to throw so much inventory on the ground. Well, it just so happens we're 8 to 10 months later when a lot of the inventory be coming due. So there's not quite as much of that on the build side too, which is causing, I think, this a little bit of a supply crunch in certain areas.
What are you plugged in with new construction right now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what are you seeing out of the builders right now? I mean, obviously we're not going to talk about the L builder that nobody likes, but as far as what sort of activity is actually happening, I'm hearing longer build times, 2 years to complete a house. I'm hearing but I don't know, as far as accepting contracts on new houses, are they back to the constrained ways that they were doing things 2 years ago?
It's not to the same effect. 2 years ago, you were seeing 300 people on a waiting list to get into a home or neighborhood. Like the top, newest neighborhoods, you may see a little bit of that, right? You get the Fields in Frisco, a lot of excitement because the PGA is there and all the new development. But in general, actually, build times are shrinking back down. They're not having the supply issues they had before. Supply costs have come down, lumber has come down some. Doesn't mean it's they're not, builders are smart too, right? They're going to hold what they have because they don't know what's going to happen in the future. But it's not as extreme as it was before, where it took a year. They would tell you it was going to take a year and it actually took, 14 to 16 months.
And then they cancel your contract and put the house back on the market for $100,000 more.
Yeah. So that's
the kind of stuff we need to avoid.
That bullishness on the builder side has gone away.
Okay.
But I will say the foot traffic in a lot of the areas that we're tracking into the models has been heavy. So there's still a really consistent demand for the builders. But I think they learned a few lessons too because things fell off really, really quickly for them too. Yeah. Because materials are going down and material timelines are coming in quicker, I think it'll start to stabilize that particular market.
Okay.
I just heard the other day, which surprised me. There was a builder that's reputable in the area, and they're building in 6 to 7 months again. Which was
6 to 7 months, okay.
And that was 2019. You could build a home in 6 to 7 months when all the selections were made and everything's up and running. So permitting is kind of catching back up a little bit in a lot of markets too. So, I think that we'll probably see that 8-month kind of average timeline pick back up on our more of our spec builds. Of course, custom is still going to be in that 12 to 18 months is more common.
You just moved up into a neighborhood in Salina, very popular high-end neighborhood. What are you seeing in Mustang Lakes?
Mustang Lakes is slowed a little bit in terms of how fast things are selling, but there for a while I think it had enough mass in terms of the people that are living in it that had friendships and were bringing them into the neighborhood. And so a lot of times these master plan neighborhoods, that's what drives their growth. They get to kind of a critical mass, and all of a sudden people want to move in the neighborhood, not just because it's an amazing neighborhood, but because their friends are there.
Yeah.
And
we saw that in Windsong.
They want to do life together.
Yeah.
Windsong's the same scenario, Light Farms.
Yep.
And also this other piece that I've never really seen before, these master plan communities have a full range of house values. So you have kind of entry-level price points, but then it goes all the way up. So you see a lot of intermoving within these master plan communities. Someone's like, hey, our family's growing. We need more space. We want something different. Our careers have continued to advance. We don't want to move outside the neighborhood, but we do want to, be in a larger home on a larger lot within the same neighborhood and still be close to our friends.
That's interesting.
So it's an interesting phenomenon. It really started, I saw in Light Farms first.
Okay.
And now we're seeing that happen in Mustang. Of course, Windsong's got a whole back section with, higher end homes, large lots. It's beautiful back there. And so they've got this, critical mass of buyers already built in to their system.
It's interesting. So I happen to be on the radar for the Salina Economic Development Center director, which that's a very good place to be.
It's great contact. Yeah.
And so she invited me to the annual roundtable, the EDC roundtable, and they did a bus tour. They did a little bus tour of Salina and where stuff is going and what's coming. Let me tell you something, Lance. It is incredible what Salina is doing in development. It's unbelievable. And there's a community coming just north of me, 6,900 units. Legacy Hills.
Yeah, Legacy Hills. Yeah, so, the developer of Mustang Lakes, Matt and his team, they've got they have Cambridge Crossing that's theirs. Moving really good.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yep.
And then they have the Parks that's just opened up of Salina, just north kind of off the outer loop. And they had sold, they barely had the water in the lakes, they're building the development, and they had 60 something homes sold already.
Wow.
And it's just dirt is all you see. And that whole area around there's probably 4,000 acres kind of around that area that's completely flat and ready to develop. So there's a lot of inventory coming in Salina.
Yeah, there's a lot. The new hype is Mosaic, the Mosaic master plan.
Yeah.
So I think it's Craig. I can't remember his last name. The guy that did Windsong.
Yeah.
He's doing Mosaic.
Yeah.
Craig.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Is it Craig? It's Craig.
Yeah, Craig. I think you're right. Yeah. But anyway, yes.
The same developer that did Windsong is going to do Mosaic.
These developers, they're figuring out this formula that works really, really well. And so when you see, even Blue Star, when they did Star Trail, it was already going to be successful because they already had, Starwood originally, Star Creek, which was really successful over in Allen. So they're building these formats that just attract people, and they have a success track record that everybody believes in.
Mm-hmm.
So it tends to do well. So same thing, I think, for, like I said, Craig, and same thing for Matt with Mustang. But these are on another level on these developments. And Salina's really well poised because they've got the gigabit city. They've got all the fiber already running through. They're certainly aligned with the tollway. That's another really important piece. And it's just a big, wide open, flat landmass, easy to develop. Big tracts of land available for development too. So it was kind of the perfect storm. And honestly, this land grab has been going on for quite some time.
But I've just seen this major uptick in the last probably month or two of construction vehicles, concrete. I'm constantly following concrete trucks up and down Dallas Parkway.
Me as well.
And so there's been a really big uptick in the amount of construction that's coming in over the last couple of months. So I found that to be, and maybe I'm feeling it a lot because that hospital, the new hospital is going to go in the corner of Dallas Parkway, and it's is it FM 423? It's FM something.
Yeah.
I'm not good with the number streets, just name it something. Anyway, so there's that hospital that's going in right there. And look, I applaud Salina for a lot of the infrastructure that they've built in advance of all of this development coming. They had transportation people from TxDOT and NTTA on the panel. They were talking about how they bought the extension land that they needed to expand. They're laying the utilities in preparation for the future, so they don't have to tear apart everything when they need to expand Dallas Parkway.
So smart.
I mean, the way that they're laying this out, it's really going to be a lot smoother we've seen in the past when Dallas does expansion on the tollway. They just rip everything to shreds, right?
I think, it's interesting. You have Plano, which was this huge development corridor, right? And then, Frisco got to learn from Plano. So then Frisco grows and develops. Remember they had like the $1 billion mile back in the day.
Right.
Well, now it's the $5 billion. Now who knows? It may be
It's
10 billion by now.
billion,
Yeah. or 50. And so they have these models of success very close, and the individuals who actually were part of that development, the planning process. And so they're standing on the shoulder of giants.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's what I see Salina as, is a huge landmass to be developed, but they're standing on the shoulders of all this development that just happened in Frisco, and they seem to be dialed in.
Well, and they even said, we contacted Frisco. We contacted, people that have gone through major expansion.
Yeah.
They've contacted those cities and said what went wrong, what went right. And they've been able to take advantage of that opportunity, right?
I would say there's probably not that many cities in America that are experiencing this type of growth this fast.
Yeah.
And Salina is certainly one of them. The faucet has not turned off on the demand side coming into Dallas-Fort Worth. We're still growing. We're leading the nation in growing jobs in Fortune 500 companies. And I don't see that trend slowing down because there's just this massive momentum that's building up.
Yeah. Well, let's kind of get back to talking about your team and moving down the road this year with the team. I have a question. So how are you keeping your team on track and motivated right now? Because it is a challenging market, right?
It certainly is. I mean, a team all performs on habits. And so the habits that were created in the last 2 years, unfortunately, are not the habits that we need to have right now to be very successful. So, as humans, right, we develop habits, we get comfortable in that, and then we expect the same results over time. When the market shifts, this habit change is a laggard kind of measure. It takes a while to get used to, I need to do new activities. I have to increase my activity even to do the same level of business I did before.
Same thing's happening with a lot of teams.
Across the board, right? And so I think that's the biggest challenge for us is, how do we show the evidence? As the market is shifting, how do we show that evidence and get the buy-in so that they go, I get it. I need to make habit changes now so that we can continue to be successful and grow. And that's the biggest, honestly, that's the biggest issue we're going through.
Can you give me a specific example or two?
Yeah. So, how we get business, usually it's either a prospecting based team or a marketing based team or a hybrid.
Right.
And so, of course, when we started our team, we were all prospecting based.
Yep.
It's lower cost to do that, but it's a lot more time and energy. And so as you continue to grow and have success, your marketing engine can grow, and then you get more attractor, opportunities that come in. So as we were scaling the team, in 2020 and 21, a lot of those opportunities just came into us. And the market also had a really natural lift. People were just coming, they're buying a property no matter how many multiple offer scenarios they need to fight through. And of course, sellers, they're coming knowing, hey, we can sell our home pretty quick, but we're going to go with the team that we have the most trust in still. And so a lot of that business just came to us. And so unfortunately, the prospecting cycle slows down because you're just servicing.
Yep.
And it does, of course, take a lot of time to service those. It took a lot longer to put a buyer under contract. So the habits that the agents built was, showing properties, writing contracts, consulting through that, not so much continuing the prospecting cycle.
Sure.
And so specifically, that's what needed to increase, is higher connection rate. There's just less individuals right now that may want to sell because of the things we talked about before, the interest rate pieces too. And then in terms of the buyers, there's a little skepticism. There's a higher interest rate. It's like they're a little more fickle, a lot more contracts falling apart in general. So you have to have just a bigger base of connecting to individuals. It's really about getting, face to face and connecting and guiding people through. And my gosh, the news is all over the place, right? So if anybody's watching the news, they're confused as can be.
Oh, of course.
They don't know what to expect.
Oh, of course. Well, and the one thing that everybody has to keep in mind is that the news is national news, right?
Correct.
It's on a national stage. What's happening nationally isn't what's necessarily happening here, right? So I think that's a big conversation that you guys have to, it's that continued education. One of the things that, I've got a couple of clients like you that put on these really large scale client appreciation events, and that you're very consistent about those. And it was something it's interesting because, when I first started in the business, those were not a thing. I mean, we had client appreciation events for you.
Right. Right.
But you guys had broker opens and open houses and stuff like that. I mean, obviously you still do those things, but the client appreciation event for realtors to have for their clients is something that I've seen kind of come online in the last 5 or 6, maybe 5 or 6 years. And you've been doing yours pretty consistently for several years, very consistently for several years now. What kind of, do you have any idea of what kind of ROI you're getting from those? Is it more client retention or is it prospecting opportunities as well coming through the door for those things?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's hard to quantify it exactly, but
Denton said the same thing.
Yeah. So if I couldn't tell you exact ROI numbers right on
Sure.
that type of business, but here's what we can say is that, we're creating something of value. The invite is the easiest phone call to make. It's
Sure.
the easiest thing to do. When people feel invited, they want to come and be a part of our community. So we value that. We know that when they get in the community too, their needs are going to rise. They're going to say, hey, they need help with whatever it is. And it's our job to make sure we're taking care of those needs when they arise. And so the more often we can get together and build up this, community, our belief is that we're going to build trust too. We're getting more face-to-face time. We want to serve in that way and take care of our clients, no matter what their need is. But sometimes they just aren't, maybe we haven't seen them a little bit. And so they just aren't as open to just a call all the time or text, but then they come to an event and they go, oh my goodness, here's what we're thinking about doing.
Yep.
And so it gets us back in conversation face-to-face. So we really value that type of connection. We feel like that's how real estate should be done.
I agree. I mean, we've been doing it for years. So.
Yeah.
I've been doing it for 15 years, Lance.
We're following your model.
Let's talk about, I want to tap into real quick about, you've been very good at diversifying your business, having multiple, you can call it a million different things, but income streams and having diversifying past just traditional real estate. Do you want to talk about any of that?
Yeah.
Talk about your experience, how that
So I grew up in a real estate family in a really, really small town. And so, my father had been the broker. He's now, over 45 years, as a broker. And the business wasn't always there. And so he had to diversify into, building, into buying units and renting, properties out, into development. And so I think there's probably, some innate piece in me that I saw that. And I thought, times are not always going to, produce exactly what you need. You need to have, put all your eggs in one basket, basically,
Sure.
right? So, in 2016, 2017 timeframe, I was going with every ounce of energy I had into real estate, trying to grow, trying to develop. And I was really, truly concerned there could be a burnout moment, to be honest.
Yeah.
And I thought, you know what? I really need to be diligent in taking some of these resources and planting seeds in some other areas that will create, passive income over time. No one knows what the future is going to be, about. But at the end of the day, I don't want to get, we've worked really hard. We don't want to get into times where it's tougher and cash flow dries up.
Sure.
And so, unfortunately, I would say it probably started from a little bit of a place of fear. It's just, hey, what if something happens and I'm not able to provide for my family in the way that I was before? I also was able to see other agents that had been in the business 20 or 30 years, and nothing wrong with that at all, but they didn't have an exit plan. They didn't have an out. They didn't have any choices to make.
And a lot of them don't have any money saved. They can't get out, right?
That's it. And that's kind of been a challenge in the industry because they're really good at sales, but they have not adapted themselves to be great investors or learning other business opportunities that would kind of counterbalance a real estate slowdown.
I even talk to real estate agents, sometimes that are getting towards that point. And I'm like, have you created a sellable business?
Yeah.
And a lot of times the answer is, I don't know. I don't know. I don't have a CRM. I don't have my data element, all the basics that you have to do to create a business. Right.
Yeah. And even, in real estate, a real estate team is not super valuable as an asset if you sell it and the person, the entrepreneur steps out.
Right.
Because there's a brand attachment. Now, it certainly can happen.
You're the rainmaker. Yeah.
And there's certainly some great stories even in our market that have worked out really, really well on that. But it's challenging to produce that. So really, we view real estate as kind of if I can say this, kind of more of a cash machine that can fund other longer term assets. Sure. And not so much as an asset itself that's going to be, have value 10 years in the future.
Same.
Yes. So that means we can't just be realtors, right? We actually have to retool ourselves and learn from an investor standpoint. How do we create a return on those hard-earned dollars that we've made, and how does that pay out passive income over time?
Sure.
And if you don't learn that, then you've committed to being on the real estate income path of having to make more and more each year.
What do you think step one is? To me, it's stay in your, go with what you know and purchase real estate as an investment property.
And that's the biggest tragedy in our business is that there are, millions of agents that for all their life will sell, lots and lots of real estate, but never themselves will actually invest in any one of them.
Mm-hmm.
So, I've learned from other people who are much smarter than I am in this area, but they call it like a deal hierarchy. And so instead of going in with a listing mindset, for example, you go in with, hey, the first thing I'd like to do is be able to buy this house. If I can't buy this house, could I control it in some form or fashion, right? That's mutually beneficial for all parties. If I can't do that, could I, potentially wholesale or flip the property? Is there an opportunity there? And then number 4, the last one is actually, okay, can I list this property?
Interesting. That's a good little golden nugget right there.
I think if real estate agents were to view, opportunities in that way, instead of just how do I go list and make a commission all the time, it would get them much more into this investor mindset. It's going to create a lot more success for them in the future for longevity and for, leaving a legacy for their family.
You haven't thrown out a book yet. I'm used to you throwing out.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, within our organization, there's a gentleman named Brett Tanner who teaches this at a very high level. And, Brett is, I think he's kind of the pioneer of this kind of mindset.
Okay.
And he goes into a lot of depth on that particular deal hierarchy and how to approach it. And so, the other thing is too is, selling real estate's great, but there's also, the wholesale and the flip market, and there's also the private lending market. And what we've seen, recently is there's a lot of growth in this private lending piece.
You talking about like syndication deals or
not even necessarily that, but just, investors that need resources or people who are buying even their personal home that need resources and they don't fit within the proverbial lending box.
Okay.
So they need other solutions. And sometimes it's just temporary needs and sometimes it's long-term.
Give me an example.
So let's say an individual owns multiple businesses, but it hasn't all hit his tax return, or he's writing off a significant amount of that on the tax returns. They have DSCR loans out there that you buy an investment type property that has cash flow. But what if he wants to buy a personal property? He's got plenty of cash. He can put 30% down, no problem, on a solid home for him and his family. But he can't tick the box, right, for the income side to be able to support that. So you could have a private lender that comes in and says, hey, I'll give you the 70% financing for you. It's going to cost you a higher interest rate.
Yeah.
But we're going to be able to get your family in and get you settled in. He might be okay with that at that time because they know, hey, I'm going to refinance in a year or two when my tax returns actually reflect more of the success in business. So that's just a small example. But that exists all over the board. It exists on the kind of the lower end investment market, I would say. There's a lot of homes that you can sell with seller financing. That's another way to create a loan. As you're selling, let's say you buy a home for $80,000, you fix it up and you put, $40,000 in it. You've got $120,000 in it. You could actually sell it for $180,000 to $200,000 potentially, and then take back a note to get a portion of those proceeds over time. They put $30,000 down. You take back the note for $150,000. Now you're getting, a high interest rate on a note you just created for a long period of time. So it creates quiet passive income.
We would need a little bit more time to dive into that because there's some pros and cons with things like that, because you're still taking on the liability, right, for the financing. Are you talking about working through a traditional lender for this, or you're just financing it yourself?
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of ways to structure this, but usually, you and partners, right, would finance this yourself.
Got it. Okay.
And take that on time, but
that's a little bit different than a traditional financing because there's caveats with that.
That's it. I mean,
you've
got to know how
for the note. They could call the note due if you've got somebody else on, owning the house, buying it from you. So I like the owner financing idea a little bit better. And,
again, the goal, if it's to make passive income, how do you create notes, which that's, a loan over time, that's passive income coming in. And if they've got a 30% equity position, you really, if you take the property back, so do you.
Right.
If they don't pay.
Sure.
And if you're in the real estate industry, you already have an opportunity to right side.
Yeah.
That scenario, resell it, whatever you need to do. So,
are you leveraging like whole life products for this?
That's a great way. Yeah. Actually, so, whole life is something that a lot of real estate individuals that are investing too, they don't want to put their cash into investments that they get penalized for pulling it out.
Yeah.
Whole life is a really great safe place. Of course, I'm not an investment advisor, but a really great place that I've put it. So
in the, from the Dave Ramseys of the world.
Dave Ramsey, he has a very specific audience.
Yes, he does.
Of get out of debt, right? This whole life policy piece is how to be your own bank. It's a totally different concept.
Yeah.
There's a really good book on that. Actually, it's called The Banker's Code.
There we go.
Yeah.
Here's my book.
George Antone, fantastic book. He also has another book called The Wealthy Code. 2 books I highly, highly recommend to learn about that.
Well, I think that's a great place for us to stop unless you have any last minute advice you'd like to give our audience.
No, I think that, the only reason you won't grow and get better in life is if you're already believe that you know everything you need to know to be successful. And so the one thing that I feel like has allowed me to grow is to continuously learn from others, take a model if there is one, read about it, and then immediately go and do. In taking action, right? I've lost a whole lot more money than I ever invested in college on taking action.
Sure.
But I've also learned so much more that can roll toward the future. So I think sometimes just getting the best information you can, don't get into analysis paralysis, and then take action.
You know what? That is so interesting that you said that. Because, I have to become vulnerable when I'm asking you questions. Like I asked you, what is this cost segregation? I don't know what it is.
Sure.
And, some people could say, well, Tamera, why don't you know what that is, and make me look stupid. But, going to people and being vulnerable about asking for information. Can you help me understand what this is or how I can leverage this? So there is a certain amount of, you've got to be able to be open with people asking questions, right? And I always believe there's no stupid question. Maybe there is, but I'm always happy to ask whatever question I need to ask to understand a concept or understand what steps I want to take next. And you've always been very valuable to me. So thank you for that.
Well,
and always being willing
I
to
attribute
talk to
that to your massive personal growth that you've had is, number one, allowing yourself to stay into curiosity. But number 2 is to keep the ego aside, right? And just go and learn and grow and not be afraid of judgment, because who cares at the end of the day? We're all on this mission, this path to try to get better and better.
Well, and the other thing that is also very important about what you said is analysis paralysis, because I've talked to several people lately, potential investors, and they're like, I read this book and this book and this book, and then I did this and I did this and then this. And I go, when are you going to buy a house?
Yeah, exactly. That's how you really learn.
Yeah, that's when you really
experiential
learn.
learning. Yeah. You got it.
Look, I understand doing due diligence and I have respect for that. Okay. I understand wanting to understand as much about a process before you stick your toe in. However, you're never going to really know until you do it.
That's exactly right. Yeah. And I think at the end of the day too, you try to limit your risk on those early deals, partner up, shadow somebody, but do it. You got to get into the game.
Do it.
Because that's how all this conceptual theoretical learning comes into, the forefront.
Sure.
And when you do have money on the line, you follow your money a lot closer, at that point, and you follow that experience, which allows you to really learn.
Well, look, not everything I've pulled the trigger on do I think today was could I've done better? What I know now, I didn't know then, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But the nice thing about real estate and DFW is there's always an opportunity to get out of what you're in and go find a better opportunity. There's always opportunities here.
Yep, that's right. Well, and again, too, if you don't start, right, you're never going to level up to the point where you're truly growing, real passive income. You got to get started.
All right, people, level up. That's where we're going to leave it today. Thanks so much, Lance, for being my guest. Always a pleasure to have you on the show. Yeah. And that is another episode. Thank you so much for joining me today. Again, I'm your host, Tamera Gaede. If you like my content, you're really going to love my escrow team. So let's get a conversation going about your title needs, and you guys make it a great day.